Let clause. Let's learn more about this clause. What does it mean and how it can be used? It computes a value and assigns it to a new variable within the query. It can be used in this way. We set the clause, a variable, and an expression. The variable we set is a new variable, what we want to define inside the query, and also to use it inside the query. So, here we don't need to use a variable, what we already defined in the process. The variable will be used later in the query in other clauses, such as where, select, etc. The expression could be a value, or an expression, that returns a value. So, we use this clause to define a variable, and to set a value for this variable. In other words, let clause is nothing else than assign activity in UiPath. Let clause can be used more than once inside a LINQ query. It can be also used at any position in the query. But it cannot be used before from clause. Normally, it should be used between from and select clauses, to calculate data that can be used inside the query, or to select it as output from the query. Let's now check some queries to see how to use let clause. I will start with a simple query for an integer array. I have the following array, which contains different numbers. Assume I want to calculate the power of each number, which is smaller than 9. To do that I have different options. The first one is using let clause in this way. As you see, I defined a variable with name power. I can use any name I want here for the variable. After that I have an expression. The expression is built using the range variable, and it returns a value. This expression is to multiply each number by itself. In other words, it's to calculate the power of each number inside the array, which meets the condition. In select clause I am selecting power variable, what I defined in let clause. This variable represents the power of each number inside the array, which is smaller than 9. So, the output of this query will be an array that contains only the numbers, which are smaller than 9. But each number inside the output array is the power of the old number, what I had in the input array. This is the way how to use let clause. Before moving to another example, let me show you another way, how to get the same output without using let clause. For example, the following query. Here I didn't use let clause. But in select clause I have an expression, to calculate the power of each number, that meets the condition of where clause. In this way I will get the same result. This is also how to use select clause with an expression. So, here instead of selecting the range variable, I am doing a calculation and selecting the output of this calculation. This expression will be executed for each number inside the array, that meets the condition. So, there is no difference between both queries. I just wanted to show you, that you can also use an expression in select clause, if you want to do some calculations before selecting the elements. Let's now go back to let clause and check another example. Assume I have the same task to calculate the power of the numbers, that are smaller than 9. But now I want also to add number 3 to the power. This means, for example, the power of number 5 is 25. After that I want to add 3. So, the result should be 28. I can do that using let clause in different ways. Let's check them one by one. The first one will be the following query. As you see, I use 2 let clauses. The first one is to calculate the power of the number. The second one is to add 3 to the power. In select clause I use the variable, which contains the end result, power plus 3. The output will be the following array. This is the first way to do that. The second way is using 2 calculations, but inside one let clause. As you see, I have the same calculations, but with a comma between them. This means, I can define more than one variable and one expression inside let clause. The output will be also the same. But I don't recommend to use this structure, because the query will not be easy to read, once you have complex expressions, or more than 2 calculations. Let's check another way to do the same. For example, the following query. As you see, I summarized both expressions in one expression. So, here I only have one variable and one expression. I am calculating the power of the numbers, then I am adding 3 to the power. The output will be the same again. The last way will be without using let clause, for example this query. As you see, I use the expression in select clause directly. The output here will be also the same again. So, we can do the same using different queries. In summary, the output will be the same, but the performance of the queries could be different. In this case, there is no difference between all these queries. But why there is no difference? As you see, I am filtering the array using where clause. After that, I am calculating some values. At the end, I am selecting all these values, what I calculated before. This means, I only calculated the necessary values, because there is no filter anymore after doing the calculations. And in the last query I am also selecting only the values I need. So, there is no difference between all these queries. Let's check another scenario. Assume I have where clause after let clauses in the first 3 queries. What will happen here? In this case, I am calculating the power of all numbers inside the array. After that I am filtering the array, to get only the numbers that are smaller than 9. This means, I calculated unnecessary values, what I don't want to select later as output. The result of the queries will be the same, but the performance will be different. In this case, the last query will be the best one regarding performance. So, you have to set the clauses in the correct order, to get the correct result, but also in the best performance. Let's now summarize the main points of let clause. It can be used as following. This structure is to define only one variable. For more than one variable, we can use the same part here, with a comma. We can also use more than one let clause in the query. The variable must be always available, or we create it here in the clause. This means, I can use a variable, what I created before inside the process. Or I can use a new variable. And here you have to make sure, that you have to use a variable, not an expression. For example, if you have a query to loop a data table, and you want to calculate the content of a specific column, you cannot use the following expression. This will be a compiler error. So, here you can only use a variable. The name of the variable is not matter. One last thing you have to learn about let clause is, that you cannot use a variable more than once in different let clauses. For example, if you define the variable power in the first let clause, you cannot use it again in the next let clause. You have to use a new variable. Why? Because let clause is to create a variable and assign a value. So, you cannot create a variable with the same name more than once. Therefore you always have to use new variables in the different let clauses. These are the main points about let clause. In the next videos you will learn more about this clause through new examples. That's all you have to learn about let clause for now.